Hey, luxury studios here. According to Forbes, the last time they published a rich list, Elon Musk was the richest man in the world with a fortune estimated at around $270 billion. Elon Musk, the co-founder and CEO of Tesla, is the richest person in the world with a net worth of $270 billion as of February 28, 2022. Behind Musk is the founder of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, with an estimated net worth of $178 billion. That's a number that's quite hard to get your head around. So let me put it this way. Mr. Elon Musk, his personal fortune is larger than the GDP of 75% of countries around the world. That's one man wielding the equivalent riches of a nation. And a fairly big one is that this is a level of wealth nobody could conceivably spend in a lifetime, no matter how expensive their taste is. Musk is 51 years of age at the time of recording this video. Now, he's probably going to have his head cryogenically frozen and live forever. But for the sake of making a point, let's assume he's going to live to 80 in order to use up all of his $270 billion before he died. Discounting interest, he would need to spend almost $25 million every single day for the rest of his life. That's well over 10 times over the average income an American makes over their entire career. Every single day for about 8,400 days in a row. Yeah, but here's something really interesting. Whilst Mr. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos may well be the richest men in modern times, he isn't the richest human being ever to have lived. In fact, remarkably enough, if you adjust for inflation, he isn't even close. The individual who holds that title is estimated to have been in possession of a fortune well over twice the size of poor, old Musk, and larger than the fortune of Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, and Jack Ma combined. The funny thing is, despite his vaunted financial position in the annals of human history, there's a very good chance you've never even heard of this guy. That being the case, let me introduce you. This is Mansa Musa, the richest man in history. As for why you haven't heard of him, there are two good reasons for that. First, he was born almost 750 years ago. And second, he was the Sultan of the Mali Empire. Most of my viewers live in Europe and the US, two parts of the world where skill systems have not traditionally put a lot of emphasis on African history. But that's a shame because the Mali Empire, the largest ever seen in Western Africa, was really quite something. At its height in the 14th century, it covered almost 500,000 square miles, and was home to around 5% of the world's population. It rose incredibly quickly in the space of just a couple of generations, drawing what's known as the Golden Age of trade in Africa. The rise of the Mali Empire was built on its unfathomable wealth. And that came primarily from two things, gold and salt, both of which were in rich local supply. So much that at the time, approximately half of all gold in the Old World, that's Europe, Africa, and Asia, came from just 3 gold mines in Mali. The idea that a vast fortune could come from gold is no surprise, but the fact salt was such a major factor might seem a little odd, when viewed through our modern lens. In many parts of 14th century Africa, salt was an incredibly valuable commodity. To the right buyer it was literally worth its weight in gold. As unlikely as that may sound, it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. After all, salt is an essential part of the human diet. We quite literally can't survive without it. It also happens to make bland food much more palatable, and it can be used as a preservative, which was especially useful before the invention of reliable refrigeration. So in regions where salt was scarce, it was priceless. Gold, on the other hand, is shiny. We use it in all sorts of things today from electronics to spaceships, but the fact it looked kind of pretty was about the extent of its appeal in the 14th century. Mansa Musa was born sometime around 1280 AD, and he came to the throne as the 10th ruler of the Mali Empire in approximately 1312 AD. His rise to power was a slightly odd one. He was only ever supposed to be a temporary ruler selected for his caretaker position when his predecessor, Abu Bakr II, decided to go and find out what was on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. The emperor takes on 3,000 ships and sets off into the vast expanse of the ocean, leaving behind his throne, and one of the greatest fortunes in history, all without a shred of evidence that there was actually anything to discover on the other side. So far, we know, neither Abu Bakr II, nor his free 1,000-strong fleet, was ever seen again, though a few historians believe he did, indeed make it all the way to South America. But that's a story for another day. The important bit for our purpose, is that this one-time ruler of the Mali Empire, never came back from his bold voyage. And so, Mansa Musa officially ascended to the throne, where he set about extending the borders of his lands, and growing his already vast wealth. By the way, I should point out that Mansa is a job title rather than a first name. It means emperor or sultan. Anyway, as the head of one of Africa's greatest empires, just how rich was Mansa Musa? Musa I, or Mansa Musa, was the 9th Mansa of the Mali Empire, one of the most powerful West African states. He has sometimes been called one of the wealthiest people in history, though his wealth is impossible to accurately quantify, and it is difficult to meaningfully compare the wealth of historical figures. Just try to imagine how much wealth did the richest person in history would possibly amass. Now add a couple $100 billion, and you've probably gotten closer to how much wealth Mansa Musa had during the 14th century. As the king of the Mali Empire in West Africa, Musa first came to power in 1312 AD. At that point, the kingdom was already prosperous and wealthier. Well, before we get to the numbers, how about an example? The new emperor was a devout Muslim, meaning much like today, it was his solemn duty to undertake the Hajj, at least once in his lifetime, the Hajj being a pilgrimage to Mecca, and one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's no exaggeration to say that when Mansa Musa decided it was time to go to Mecca, the pilgrimage that ensued from Mali to the Arabian Peninsula is one of the most remarkable journeys ever made by a human being. Well, I say, as a human being, what I actually mean is 60,000 men and women, 100 elephants at Campbell's, a personal guard of 500 highly trained warriors and enough food, water and animals to eat for everyone. Basically, Mansa Musa undertook this 2,700-mile pilgrimage at the center of an entire movable city, a caravan that stretched longer than the eye could see. I mean, it was bigger and more extravagant, even than the entourage Aladdin took with him to impress Princess Jasmine, and that was made by a magic genie. Now, if you're anything like me, you'll probably take a bit of spending money with you, when you go on a trip. And it seems Mansa Musa did exactly that, because tucked away in a bum bag, I absolutely refuse to say fanny pack, he'd reserved a little extra cash to treat himself along the way. Of course, a little extra cash has something of a different meaning, when you're the richest man ever. In this case, it was 21,000 kilograms of solid gold, just in case there were some bargains to be had in duty-free. You might be wondering, how exactly did he transport such a vast amount of gold, or at least 20,999 kilograms that didn't fit in his bum bag? That job was left to his 12,000 slaves, each of whom was given almost 2 kilos in solid gold apiece. Mansa Musa also brought thousands of kilos of gold dust, which was used as currency throughout his kingdom. Take all this together, the tens of thousands of people and hundreds of animals, the unimaginable quantities of gold. It's fair to say the world had never before seen anything quite like the display of wealth that Mansa Musa put on, during his trip to Mecca. And yet in reality, this extravagant show of riches wasn't all it seemed. As you may well know, another of the pillars of Islam is zakat, which is the giving of alms to charitable causes. That's right, Mansa Musa hadn't brought all this gold for himself. He was planning to give it away. Like all of it, it's said that so much gold was handed out to the poor, en route to Mecca, that Mansa Musa single-handedly crashed the price of the commodity across most of North Africa, and the western Arabian Peninsula, including the major gold trading cities like Cairo, Medina and Mecca itself, precipitating a decade-long recession. He was basically the Elon Musk of his days, and time back then, but his genuine generosity was about more than just cold hard gold dust. Mansa Musa also wanted to share his book leaves, far and wide, being the richest man in history. He didn't settle for simply spreading the word. Instead, he started a tradition every Friday for the entirety of his pilgrimage, no matter where he found himself. He had a mosque built. Considering the trip took almost 2 years in total. That's a lot of mosques. In the interests of presenting a balanced view, I should point out that a lot of time has passed since Mansa Musa ruled over the Mali Empire, and written records from the time are pretty much non-existent. That means, it's difficult to be completely sure if his intentions on the pilgrimage were solely philanthropic and spiritual. Some historians suspect he was keen to show off his immense wealth, and resources as a kind of medieval PR exercise, a branding mission designed to impress his friends, frighten his enemies, and just generally put the Mali Empire on the map. And it certainly did exactly that, both figuratively and literally, because as a direct result of the famed Mansa Musa gain for himself and his empire on his way to Mecca, both would soon begin to crop up on world maps for the first time, including the Catalan Atlas, one of the most important medieval maps of the 14th century. You can see Mansa Musa himself right here, holding a gold coin and just generally looking like a bit of a boss. The pilgrimage also acted like a sort of epic recruitment campaign with Mansa Musa, his wealth, generosity and effortless power, winning him thousands of supporters and securing his empire the services of some of the most celebrated thinkers and artists of the era, many of whom he brought back west, when the caravan returned home after completing the Hajj. Speaking of returning home, it was around this time that Mansa Musa began to sprinkle a little gold dust within the borders of his own lands, to the building of mosques and madrasas. Those are educational institutions in many cities, but there was one place in particular for which Mansa Musa reserved most of his attention. Timbuktu. It's somewhere you've almost certainly heard of, even if you don't know why, and can't point to it on a map. You may even think it's some kind of mythical location, like Atlantis or El Dorado. Don't worry, plenty of people do. These days Timbuktu is used in the English language as a byword for somewhere unimaginably distant and remote. A status is likely earned because no European managed to figure out how to get there until the 1830s. But the main reason the name became famous in the first place is largely thanks to Mansa Musa. He annexed Timbuktu on his way back from Mecca, and set about turning it into one of the most important centers for trade, culture, religion and learning, not just in Africa, but in the entire world. The Jinga Reber Mosque, which Mansa Musa paid for, with 200 kilograms of solid gold, still stands today and makes up part of Timbuktu University for a time. One of the world's premier seats of knowledge, boasting 25,000 students, and a library of 1 million books. That's more than were held in the Great Library of Alexandria at the height of its fame, and all this, at a time when most Europeans believed Africa was a continent full of uncultured savages. Putting an exact number on Mansa Musa's bank account today is obviously pretty difficult, but the figure, most often cited accounting for inflation, is approximately over more than $400 billion. That's about the GDP of Norway or Ireland. In truth, it's nothing more than a finger in the air, not that it really matters. Mansa Musa was a man so wealthy that the exact numbers involved aren't important. His wealth was to all intents and purposes limitless. He could do whatever he wanted, whenever he felt like it. Luckily, it seems that what he most often wanted to do was give his wealth away in order to improve the lives of others. And there are certainly worse ways to spend the greatest fortune in history. I'm sure you'll agree. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.